Hello there. Lucky enough to have David Uzzell. He's actually got to catch a flight, so we're going to go through these questions like reasonably quickly. I'd look at the PowerPoint first before you actually watch this interview. Hello David, thanks for coming along. This is really brilliant. I can talk to you. Firstly, I kind of want to just ask you a few personal questions. Could you tell us a little about your background as it kind of relates to interpretation?
Well, I did a first degree in geography, in fact, for 3 years, and I became interested in people's perception of the environment. And this was at a time when there was the development of an area of psychology called environmental psychology. So I moved across into environmental psychology, where I subsequently did a PhD. Right. Having got the PhD, I then worked as a research fellow for the head of our department. It was called Terence Lee. And we had a number of projects that I was working on. One was for the Forestry Commission, looking at developing a package of instruments, package of tools for evaluating Forestry Commission visitor centres. And then also I did some work for the Countryside Commission for Scotland, as it was then, partly with Don Aldrich, evaluating their Farm Open Day programme. They had a family day on the farm programme, and we did an evaluation of that. And I guess what made those projects perhaps slightly different from a lot of other evaluation studies at the time was that they were very much driven from within psychology rather than any other area. So that the work that we did evaluating the Farm Open Day was really quite innovative in terms of the kind of psychological theories that it drew on to look at. It was about visitor learning. What do visitors learn when they get to spend a day on the farm? And what we wanted to do was to try and get away from this kind of accretion model of learning. Well, they come away, they know 27 more facts. What we were interested in was, does the way they think about farming, has that changed as a consequence? So has their cognitive structures, if you want to put it technically, changed? Do they structure their thinking about it in different kinds of ways? And we found that whereas you get very small changes in terms of attitudes or in terms of knowledge, we did find some quite significant changes in the way people thought about farming. They thought about it in a very, very different way from the way they thought about when they arrived at the farm. So you could see that, I mean, for me, the kind of important message that came out of that is that when we evaluate interpretation, we've got to be careful. You know, when we draw conclusions about what people are or are not learning. Sometimes they're learning things and we're not measuring them.
Exactly. Right.
You know, so anyway, I've rambled, but that's how I got into it. I mean, it's purely as a research fellow in the psychology department. We had these two contracts. I say one was for the Forestry Commission doing this development of instruments, and then I just found it fascinating. You know, I was going around to these most wonderful forests. You know, David Marshall Lodge up here, and in Winlatter in the Lake District, and Dalby, and just all over the country. We looked at 13 forests in all, and we did big surveys in each of them, and so on and so forth. And I got quite hooked. Right. And so I then, in the process of doing that, having developed this instrument for evaluating not only a visitor centre exhibition, but also what people were doing in the forest itself, looking at what they thought about their experience once they got home. We did that by means of a kind of postal questionnaire, but we also did what's called behavioural mapping, whereby we followed people around the visitor centre to see, you know, where they were spending their time. You know, because they would come back to you, you would interview them, and they say, "Oh, we found that the display on Rob Roy, you know, really fascinating." Right. Then you actually look at how much time they spent there, and they spent no time at all.
Right. Okay. Right. Yeah. That's
so we wanted to get some behavioural measures as well as attitudinal knowledge measures. Anyway, having developed these tools, I met landscape architect, chief landscape architect for Warrington Newtown, who just built a visitor centre in Warrington, big spanking new visitor centre. And I did a similar sort of study for him. And to cut a long story short, we got on personally very well together. We started to work with other interpreters, and I then started to do be a consultant.
Right.
And we formed a company called First Interpreters, which worked all over the country. Small jobs like little leaflet through to a travelling exhibition, through to the original interpretive plans for Portsmouth Naval Base. We did an interpretive strategy for Calderdale, and so on. It was sort of very, very big jobs as well. And for me that was really interesting, because it was actually doing interpretation, and I learned an enormous amount from that experience. But I think what I brought to that experience was actually being very, because I'm a psychologist, I think about the users. My perspective was that of the visitor.
Right.
So, in a sense, that was one of the things I brought to the practice, to try and pose questions about what is the visitor experience, what are they looking for from this, which at the time a lot of interpreters weren't doing. They were saying, okay, this is the story, this is how we want to tell it, these are the media that we've got, and the visitor didn't really come into the frame.